Shalom, WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week in Shul, we'll be reading Parshat Mishpatim, or the Parsha of Ordinances, a civil law code that follows the revelation at Sinai here in about the middle of the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot. The whole Parsha, the whole topic of Mishpatim raises the question, what do civil laws have to do with religious practice? Why does Judaism, why does the Torah give us a civil law code here? Aren't civil laws best left for the civil government, and religion should just deal with the rituals and the relating to God piece? It's a fair question, and one of the theories that places the laws here in Exodus is the last week's Parsha, Parshat Yitro, ends with laws about the altar. When you build an altar for God, you should make it out of stone, and you should ascend on the steps very carefully, not to expose yourself, right? The Kohanim later will wear breeches, specially mandated breeches, but you can imagine if you're in a society where you wear robes, you have to be careful. And the stones, they can't be hewn from iron tools, but only can be worked with other stones. And so that Parsha ends, and immediately we come in with Ve'ela HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifnechem. These are the ordinances, the rules which you shall set before them. And Rashi, the great commentator, asks, what's one got to do with the other? And he quotes a midrash, a rabbinic story, that says this is indicating that the Sanhedrin, the chief court of the Jewish people, once we are settled in the Holy Land and the temple is built, that the Sanhedrin should be on the Temple Mount. That in fact, religious ordinances and civil ordinances have the same status, that you don't have one without the other. That there's something about the civil ordinances that informs our religion, and something about our religious necessities that informs our civil legal code. But the question remains, what is that thing? What is the connection? The Talmud offers a couple of very interesting ideas. One comes from the mouth of Rabbi Eliezer. He says, from where is it derived that a judge may not step over the heads of the sacred nation, walking among those assembled for the lecture, who would sit upon the floor in such a manner that he has the appearance that he's stepping on their heads? It is derived from that which is stated, neither shall you go up by steps, right? The end of Parshat Yitro, and right next to us, at the beginning of Parshat Mishpatim, now these are the ordinances. So what's the connection? Rashi goes to explain it. This passage, which comes from the Talmud in Sanhedrin, and Rashi says, it's simple. It's a kal v'chomer, right? One thing that you can derive, an even simpler thing from something that is strict, right? So there is a stricture that you shall not walk upon the heads of the stones going up to do your religious duty. So too, you shouldn't have the appearance that you're stomping on the heads of the Jewish people when you are adjudicating civil matters. In other words, from this connection to God, the value of every person is derived, and therefore your civil legal codes need to protect all people. Further emphasizing that point, another rabbi, Rabbi Elazar, the school of Rabbi Elazar, not the same guy as Rabbi Eliezer, he takes this passage, right? Ela mishpatim asher tasim lefnehem. These are the civil ordinances that you shall set before them. Coming right after the revelation at Sinai, he says this verse equates a woman with a man with regard to the civil laws in the Torah, right? Everybody stood at Sinai, says Rabbi Elazar, and so too, these legal ordinances have to apply to everybody equally, right? Both equal protections under the law, meaning there need to be laws that protect women as well as men, and equal binding by the law, that for a society to function, everybody needs to be bound by the law in the same way. That might not sound like a lot to us, but it's a very progressive idea. And as we look through Parshat Mishpatim, we see again and again that playing out, right? The very first group who's talked about in Parshat Mishpatim, a little anachronistically and difficult for us, are slaves. But what happens is slaves are given rights. They're given release in the 7th year. They're given the right that if their boss, their master, beats them, crushes a tooth, knocks out their eye, that they can go free. That they have protections. You're not allowed to abuse them just because they have debts to pay. The slavery here is a little more like indentured servitude. Obviously, we don't have any tolerance for slavery at all. But even here, 3,500 years ago, in a society that did, here those people who are at the lowest of the low, enslaved people who have had to sell themselves because of debts or whatever it may be into indentured servitude, they're given rights. Further, we have laws about the widows and the orphans, that widows and orphans also have rights. Those who are without protection because their parents are dead or because their husbands have died. It was a very difficult, a very dire straits to be in, to be a widow. Those people have certain rights and certain protections, and so on and so forth. People who are caught unawares, people who are disabled, throughout Parshat Mishpatim are protected, because that is what the laws are all about. That's what these ordinances are all about. They are not just to keep a society running smoothly. They are not, as we would say maybe in modern legal parlance, merely to prevent harm. Right? This is not that kind of legal code like Mill would say, that laws exist to prevent harm. Here, laws exist to recognize the holy nature of people, that we can't, because we're in power, stomp on their heads. And because it's not that the king is a god, it's that God is God, and the king or the prophet or the judge is here to do the bidding of God, to keep people equal and to protect each other, because everyone is built B'Tselem Elohim, everyone is built in the image of God, and therefore the place of law is to protect people, especially those who need the protection the most. It's a powerful idea, a powerful message, this connection, this linking between law, civil law, that which we would think religion shouldn't get involved in. Here we learn that, in fact, that is at the heart of civil law, the heart of building a better society, seeing the holiness, the sacredness in everyone, especially those who might be passed over, especially those in the weakest position, the destitute, the widow, the orphan, the sojourner among you, the immigrant. All of those, says the Torah in Parshat Mishpatim, if we want to ascend to the altar like we spoke about at the end of Parshat Yitro, at the end of last week's Parsha, then we need to protect those. We ascend only by recognizing the holiness in all people, creating a society that protects them, that raises them up. And then after Mishpatim, we come to Parshat Truma, the construction of the Tabernacle, right? Once we have the civil code in place that protects all the people, then we can build this dwelling place, this Mishkan, to have the sense of God dwelling among us. When we recognize that God is already dwelling among us in the form of all the people, the beautiful sacred neshamas, the beautiful sacred souls that are among us, then and only then can we build this Mishkan, this tabernacle, to have the sense of God, God's self, dwelling among us. May we all learn to use law, to use our positions of power when we have them, our positions of privilege, to bring forth a good society for all, good laws for all that raise people up and help equalize for everyone. And when we do, we too have the opportunity to have that sense of God dwelling among us. All we have to do is open our eyes and see in the dignity of all people that God is all around us already. Shabbat Shalom.